Game on.
Hey, it's Unqualified Critics, and of course, I watch Glen's Retro Show.
Hi everybody, thank you for joining me on today's edition of Glen's Retro Show. Well, today I was just talking to my friend Unqualified Critics about some of the old consoles, the TurboGrafx 16 Mini that's been delayed, the Sega Genesis, and some other consoles. And we figured, why don't we just record it so we could share it with all of you today. So it was a very improv type of episode, really nothing crazy in there, but we thought we just would share it. So without further ado, here is me and the Unqualified Critics talking about some classic consoles. Let's have a listen.
So let's get right into what we're going to talk about today. Is the non-released as of yet or available the TurboGrafx 16 Mini from Konami. Now, I obviously have one. I got the CD. I got the TurboGrafx 16 I've had since launch day.
So jealous.
And actually, you know what? I used to have the Turbo Express, but an ex-girlfriend, well, she took it.
Aren't those really rare now?
They are. They have the same problem. Everything from that era is the capacitors seem to go bad. So even though she has it, I know she can't play it now. She's not going to have any sound or video. So at least I feel a little bit better. But
did she like it, or did she take it to spite you?
Well, when back in the day, I bought one for myself for Christmas. And she was actually from Montana. So she would go on planes. So I wanted to go back and forth. And she had taken it, and then she never came back. So it never came back. So much for that. But, you can still get them. And what people are doing now is they'll take out the screen. Now, the big thing about the Turbo Express was that the Hue cards went right in. There's no adapter. You can play the same exact game. But it had a really high-quality 2-inch screen in there. But still a 2-inch screen. So people are modifying it with a 3-inch screen. And to do the capacitor change.
What does that sound like? That almost reminds me of the people that throw 19-inch and 20-inch monitors in arcade one-ups. But I digress.
Right, and I'm actually fine with the 17 inches in there. I don't need to have a screen that big in my face.
I agree.
My eyesight is not that bad, but you can still get the Express, but they're going to be expensive. And probably non-working condition, you're looking at 200, and probably in the threes when you go for one that's actually working. But even working, you're going to have to get the capacitors replaced pretty quick because they are like that entire generation just had bad caps. And if you don't replace them, the problem is, like many Amiga owners will tell you, is they leak. And when they leak, they start to eat away at the traces on the board. And once that happens, you're
game over.
Well, you can sometimes fix them. Depends how many layers it eats through. But you're in for a lot bigger a challenge than just doing the capacitor.
That's so tragic. It's a whole generation of hardware kind of not quite lost, but close.
Well, that's why, emulation is one good thing. But like the Mister project, where it's actually hardware recreation.
Right.
I do like that because there is going to come a day and a time where no matter what you do, they're going to start failing. You're not going to be able to get the parts.
Right.
Again, talking about Amigas, the custom chipset, there's only so many out there. Once they're gone, they're gone. I'm actually hoping that someone actually does a small FPGA chip where you can just start putting in these FPGA chips to replace the chips when they go bad. But again, even then, in the next 50, 60 years, motherboards are going to go bad. Something's going to go wrong.
Yeah.
And they're going to fail. So we're getting way off topic. I could talk forever. But So I have with me today the Unqualified Critic. Please say hello.
Hey guys, David from Unqualified Critics here. I feel like a shill because that's what I always say on my channel. But good to see you. And thanks for having me on.
Oh, of course. To our people watching the video, it's only been about a minute. But between me and you, it's been like an hour and 15 trying to get Skype working and everything working here.
It's all right, man. I'm in my beer virus bunker in the basement, so no illness can pierce these walls. So I don't have a whole lot going on. So it's all good to just jump on here and do a call and do a chat.
That is the one good thing about today. You can't go out a lot right now, but classic games, man. That's the beauty of these things. You can sit home and play them for quite a bit.
As long as we have power, we're good. We don't even need internet.
Well, you know what? I didn't even think about that. I got a generator though.
Sweet.
So I got that going.
You're in business.
So we're going to be talking about the Konami TurboGrafx 16 or PC Engine Mini, depending on your region. And it's been delayed. A lot of people are saying it's not going to come out, and I think it will. It's definitely delayed. My understanding is the factories right now in China are starting to open back up. A lot of my friends are going back to work who are out in that area. But I'm probably more excited for this one than I was for the NES Classic, the
Wow.
SNES Classic. That's true. Or the Genesis Classic. Doug will be mad at me for saying
Wait, are
that.
you suggesting the Turbo is a better console than a Genesis?
I do. I am. There's so many different things. I mean, I still have them all. And I know you do too. I have an original of all of them. I just found that the Genesis for me, I wasn't huge into the sports games. And if you're a sports guy, the
Right.
Genesis was your game.
And same here too.
Right. So for me, I like the ghosts. Sorry, the Ghouls and Ghosts. I enjoyed that, but there wasn't too many more I had, and I actually got turned off. And to be honest, I sold off my originals except my CD. I had the original tray loading CD because I was really annoyed at the CD-ROM itself because they didn't really come out with anything good.
Right.
They
That was the doom of the Genesis. It was all promise in the last few couple years of a generation. And what did they really give us? I think there were a couple good 32X games, but I didn't own a Genesis when I was younger, so I had a cousin who had one. But you know how it was when you're a kid, like you don't have a lot of games. I remember playing Columns at his house. I had a friend who was also a neighbor who'd go over and play his Genesis. Sometimes we'd play Vector Man. And I don't really remember what else I played. I never got the chance to play 32X or CD. I've just only after the fact heard about kind of the heartbreak of it just confusing the market, maybe not quite delivering. But let me ask you this, between the CD and just for me as someone who doesn't know a ton about Genesis, CD and 32X, which one was the bigger disappointment?
honestly the CD. The 32X just had so much bad press. I didn't get into it either back then. I got it
It
years
had a really
later.
good Doom port though, didn't it?
The Doom was okay, but they
That
was
was
like
just okay.
it was because I also had a Jaguar. And the Jaguar had a full screen. It
I had a
was better.
Jaguar too, my man.
Right. So it was to me it was a poor port, but I like Metalhead. I enjoyed Metalhead. It was like a mech type of game. The Star Wars arcade game was good. So there was just so much bad press because of the Saturn and Sega of America that the 32X I think could have had bigger potential. So I was definitely more disappointed over the CD, and the reason being, at the time, full motion video was the rage. Even though the
I
machine
know.
really
They
was,
shoehorned it into everything.
they did. It wasn't really capable with the colors it had on there. But a lot of people think that's all it was. They thought the Sega CD was just able to play video, and it's not true. They added a second Motorola 68,000 in there, 12.5 megahertz, I believe, hardware scaling and rotation like this SNES, but even more advanced that the SNES had in it. It had an extra Yamaha sound chip, more RAM. So it really would have been a really good powerhouse for arcade conversions. Like they use this super scale technology, like I think off the top of my head right now, like a Space Harrier or Hang On, and they just came out with full motion video game and full motion video game, and it was just that disappointed me a lot. And that's what turned me off. And I went into Babbage's. People remember Babbage's back in the day,
I've
and
heard of it, but I wasn't around
yeah,
for it.
I traded everything in. But when they saw my CD, they looked at it because they had the top loader. They go, "What is that?" I said, "This is the original CD." "Oh, you probably shouldn't trade that in. That's gonna be valuable." And I said, "You know what? All right." So I kept that. And then many years later, I got another a Genesis. Unfortunately, though, I had the launch edition Genesis, which didn't have the lockout chip on there. And all the ones I have now, I got two of them. Both have the lockout chip, which is fine. But
Wait, are you talking about a region lockout? I don't know that much about Genesis.
no, the when the Sega Genesis first came out, you would turn it on, it would go right into the game. And
Yeah.
then a couple of companies didn't license the cartridge; they just did a cartridge to it. So Sega did a quick revision, putting like a lockout chip in there. I forgot what they call it. But when you turn on those Genesis systems, a little screen comes up saying licensed or under use by Sega.
Okay.
And the other thing is that they kind of started cheaping out on the parts. So the sound got a little degraded, and then they had another revision. Sound got degraded a little bit more, and then they went to the Model 2. So if you ever look at the Genesis on the top, the original launch edition would say high definition graphics at the top.
Right.
But then also the first revision still had that on there. The one that just says Sega 16-bit with the no high definition graphics, that was the worst one. That's the one with the audio was like, eh.
Right.
So you don't want that one at all. So in any case, I wish I had kept it, but I was never as much into the Genesis because of the sports games, personally.
By the way, I have to side note. So number one, agree with you on the sports games. And I don't know why I got Super Nintendo and not Genesis. I don't think these were informed decisions when I was younger. It's just kind of as a household, we had the Nintendo, we're gonna get the Super Nintendo. It has to be better. I think in hindsight, I've played both libraries a fair bit, not at all exhaustively, but I do prefer the Super Nintendo, I think. But I like both. Obviously, they're both good systems. But funny thing about you telling that story of the different gradations of the audio, I fell down into a YouTube rabbit hole one night and watched a ton of detail on all that. And then I realized at some point, what am I doing? I don't care about this. I'm not going to go buy this hardware. I don't even have a television where this matters. Like I only have, modern TVs. And then I just turned it off. But it's a good example of how YouTube can take you down a rabbit hole. But yeah, and it's interesting because the Gen 1, which the early Gen 1 Genesis, what you're talking about, had the better audio.
Right.
But it wasn't stereo, right? Unless you plugged your headphones into it.
Yeah,
which that's crazy.
That was a crazy thing. Yeah, on the Genesis on the front, they had the headphone jack.
Which was stereo, I think.
Which was stereo. So you had to get an adapter to plug into that, run it around the machine to the back.
What were these people thinking?
Yeah, on the Sega CD, the same thing. There was a short cable. You'd plug in, it would go to the back of your Sega CD.
Did TurboGrafx have native stereo output?
Yes and no. So when you got your...
You needed that adapter on the back, right? What was it called?
Turbo Tap.
No. Turbo Tap was for the 5-player multi-tap.
No,
Go ahead.
It was still called the Turbo Tap. It clicked on the back of the unit.
I thought it was called the Turbo Booster.
Oh, you know what? Thank you. You're right.
Get dunked on, Glen.
That's right. You did. I got clammed. So yeah, the Turbo Tap was the 5-player adapter. You're right.
Correct. Yeah.
And the Turbo Booster gave you composite out and your stereo. But you also could have just went to the back of the machine. There were just it was like 80 pins, whatever it was. You could have tapped in and got it.
But wait, but hold on. But was there a first party accessory for Genesis that did anything like that?
No.
Because I feel like I'm hearing an argument for objective superiority for TurboGrafx over Genesis. I mean, I feel like that's what I'm hearing. Maybe I'm crazy.
No, you're right. Now the Genesis also only had composite out, and then you had to buy a cable, which I think was the same cable that the Texas Instruments used that gave you video and audio out. But I still don't think it gave you stereo on the cable. I have to remember. I think you still had a cable on the front. But the Turbo Booster gave you the composite out. But again, it was a silly thing. You had to buy an adapter to do it. But
dude, here's the problem. It's market confusion all day. Everybody blames Genesis for that. But the reality is that whole era of gaming, you had, other than I think Nintendo mostly, I mean, they had all sorts of Game Boy revisions and stuff. But I think Nintendo mostly stayed out of this. But you had all these other consoles that were so confusing. And if you're a 12-year-old kid like I was running around trying to figure out what to play, how do you make sense of any of that? So I had the TurboGrafx. I didn't even know about the booster. And I was starting to develop a little bit of interest in home audio and video. I mean, I would have bought it if I knew what it was and knew what it did. And I had a stereo TV. I would have loved to have had it. I didn't even know it existed. It was just all so confusing. It wasn't just Sega that got into that. I mean, they maybe were the worst. But
what happened, I think what happened was like the original NES that came out, at least it had composite video and audio. It was mono, but at least you had the option.
Right.
The Sega consoles needed a cable. It was always just RF out. The PC Engine was RF out. And then basically, since Nintendo had such a stranglehold on the industry, that's where Sega came with the 16-bit. It was in your face, more power, more graphics.
Right.
And the TurboGrafx 16 fell into that same loophole. It is an 8-bit system. I mean, it is. I think any system should be judged by its processor. And it was the same processor that it was actually an enhanced processor that was in the NES.
Right.
Just improved of it.
I didn't know that until recently. My mind was blown when I read that.
Yep. And they added a video chip that was capable of 16-bit graphics. And to this day, my dying breath will say that graphically, it looks better than a Sega Genesis. It looks comparable and sometimes better even than an SNES. Not if you're doing like scaling and zoom, but just the color palette on screen and the way it was able to side scroll, it was good. And a lot of people don't even know that when the NES was out, what was the name of the company? I'm trying to think of the name of the company now who developed the TurboGrafx 16. I can't think of it right now. My God.
NEC.
That was the NEC. Was the people who bought the rights from the company, and I cannot think. Bomberman. What was the company that came up with Bomberman? Sunsoft. So they developed the architecture, went to Nintendo, and offered it to them. And Nintendo just laughed in their faces.
Oh, I didn't know.
So
I never knew that part of the story.
right, so that's when NEC kind of stepped in and took it, and it was a good marriage because like the CD technology, the TurboGrafx was the first to have the CD technology. It was a single speed, but NEC was very big into that, so they came out with the add-on, and the the TurboGrafx just had a lot going for it. The sad part was in the States, they couldn't bring some of these good games over because of licensing, and the marketing was bad. But anyone who played one will tell you that it's a really good system.
And it was so unique. I mean, Genesis and Super Nintendo had their differences, but to me, as a consumer back then, and not a super well informed consumer as a kid, obviously, it felt like just a totally different experience. And obviously, the shoot 'em up offerings,
Right,
how many of them there were,
right.
that was my introduction to that genre, and it just, I don't know, it stood apart. It's kind of like today having a Nintendo Switch and an Xbox, or a Switch and a PlayStation. I think back then you could have made a really strong argument to have a TurboGrafx alongside either a Genesis or a Super Nintendo, which was the direction I went. But the CD was confusing too, because then you had also Super CD, and I still to this day don't fully understand all the different variations. And I've watched stuff on YouTube about it, and I think I have it mostly down, but I'm still a little confused. And you just think, as a customer back then with no internet, no YouTube to explain anything, I mean, my God,
Yep.
overwhelming.
Well, that was, and you're right. The CD-ROM had a very small memory card. It was the CD card. It didn't
Yeah,
add much RAM, and so they started making the arcade card, the Super Arcade card, the Super Arcade card. They came out all these different ones. So there was
yeah,
confusion in there. And then if you didn't have the right memory card, you couldn't play like Super Street Fighter 4, or not 4, sorry, Super Street Fighter Turbo had come out, but you needed like the arcade card. So if you
the
let you had
big
the arcade,
fat one
the
with all
big
that
fat,
RAM on
right,
it. Yeah,
right. So I agree with that. Then when the TurboGrafx kind of was out, they started coming out with the Turbo Duo, and that had it built in already, so you didn't need
right.
anything. And those are real expensive. You can find one of those in working condition.
Yeah,
Those are
no.
very expensive.
Well,
Um,
and that's why I didn't want to have to find it in working condition, because TurboGrafx Mini is, and I know it's not the same thing, and some people don't like software emulation. I do. I'm fine with it. Get my 720p, get my HDMI, hook it up to my modern sound system. I don't need it to be exact perfect. I just need it not to be noticeably off. I don't want the sound to be noticeable.
right.
I can deal with the 7 frames of lag and all that stuff
Yeah,
that
and
you
you know what?
typically get with good
And,
software emulation.
and you're right. Like the NES Classic and the SNES Classic, those are emulation, and they play very well.
Oh
So
yeah,
it can be
I
done
love them.
right. But then the
Yep.
PlayStation came out, and they didn't. I mean,
Yeah.
they
Right.
play, but they had the PAL version on there.
Right.
It's just not done right. Then the Sega Genesis one came out, and that one actually is not too bad. There's a couple of games in there that are a little audio problem. Even Sega themselves, so it's not just at games. Even Sega
Yeah.
themselves has some audio issues in there. But I mean, it works very well. So
And they
I
had
agree.
I think a scaling issue with a couple games that are a different resolution than 4:3. But I think the latest Project Lunar update 1.05 fixes that with the
Right,
native games.
right. And for the 99%, well, 90, I'll say 92% of the population, that's fine. The die-hard core ones will always have a problem with software emulation.
Yeah.
They'll even have a problem with Mister, and that's hardware emulation. It's not even
Yeah.
hardware
But even
emulation.
that's still not
Recreation.
perfect to the original. I mean, it's still emulation.
It's hardware recreation, and it can be. It just takes time for them to get all the bugs out. But
Okay.
in theory, if you're using a fully programmable gate array, there would be no difference discernible between the original and it if it's been programmed properly. That's the whole point of the FPGAs.
But yeah, so for me, and I think for a decent chunk of the market, obviously not everybody, I would rather hold an official controller that's an exact replica and then have 95, 98% of the experience on screen than play like a box. Like some of these, you buy these Mister boards and throw them together in a box and plug whatever into it. To me, having not a, now I know you can get, replica controllers and stuff, but if I'm picking between the two, I want the official controller, official artwork. Even the box these machines come in, like you mentioned TurboGrafx marketing sucked. I remember thinking their box looked sweet. That green and orange looked sweet. I mean, it was super, early 90s, late 80s, whenever it
Yep,
launched. But
92? No,
I was
it
gonna
was
say,
89. It was 89. 87 was released in Japan. I think it was 89 in the States.
okay. So yeah, but I think it looked really cool, and I kind of want that. But I'm in it for the nostalgia more than just the perfect replication. But yeah, so it's delayed indefinitely, and I think we disagree on this a little bit, and hopefully I'm wrong. I'm a little concerned they're going to scrap it. It's of course Konami bought the rights to TurboGrafx, I think in 2012, a number of years ago. They sat on the license. Now they licensed some of the games to like Nintendo for Virtual Console and stuff,
Right.
but then those are gone unless you want to keep your Wii or Wii U, which I sold mine off. And they had actually a decent TurboGrafx selection there, but again, it's not the controller, it's not the hardware. That's what some
Right.
people want. That's why the NES Mini, in part, I think, was so successful. It was a revelation to have recreated hardware. TurboGrafx was going to offer that. It's been available for pre-order on Amazon for, I don't know, around 6 months. I got my pre-order in on pretty much day one. But they have a lot. So the other big consoles re-release didn't have any pre-order data. So they launched it and they weren't really sure if it'd be successful or not. Genesis, PS Mini flopped. Genesis, I don't know if it. My guess is it just kind of did medium. I don't
Right.
know that it flopped, but I don't know that it was great. We saw tons of sales, and clearly the NES and SNES were huge. Where does TurboGrafx fall on that spectrum? I don't know. I'd be surprised if it ever sold as well as the Genesis Mini. It just doesn't have the name recognition. I know it was a lot bigger in Japan than it is in the US with the PC Engine, so
Yep.
maybe over there. But I paid attention to the Amazon sales ranking for the pre-order, and it would be, ranked 1,500, 2,000 in gaming sales for a long time. And then it would pop a little higher when they would release or announce more games and stuff. But here's my kind of conspiracy concern is that it didn't get the pre-orders they wanted, beer bug hits, and they use it as an excuse to bail on the product. Now, when they announce that it's delayed, they use the term delayed indefinitely. They also say they're putting their resources toward getting it out there. So they're leaving the door open. So I'm not saying this is definitive at all, but delayed indefinitely just seemed like really strong language. They could have said delayed and we don't know when it'll be out, but we'll keep you posted. At the same time, they pulled pre-orders from Amazon. So as of at least yesterday, and I think still today, you cannot pre-order.
Right.
Why wouldn't they continue to collect pre-orders while they work on their supply chain? So I don't care if it's just delayed. I mean, I've waited for this thing for a long time. I've hoped for one of these ever since the NES Mini came out. So I'm cool with waiting a few months or even longer. But I'm just worried they canceled it. And again, the last thing I'll say on that, Konami canceled Silent Hills in the middle of a horror genre resurgence when everybody wanted horror and PT was white hot and they still just canned that. Now I know there were politics and stuff involved, but Konami's not afraid to can stuff for their core game audience.
Well, I agree with you definitely with the like Amazon. You can't pre-order it right now, and you're right. Why not leave it there? It's just more time to have people pre-order the product. So that I agree with those, but I don't think they would survive the wrath of the locals of where Konami is versus here. And
you talk about Japan.
Yeah, I think it was like I said, it was very, very popular there.
Right.
In the States, I think I may disagree a little bit. I think it may do as well or maybe even better than the Genesis, only because, like you said, it wasn't very popular back in the day. But if you go on eBay or anywhere trying to get games for it now, they've gotten very expensive. So
But
I think
there's so few of them, though. I mean, supply is a big part of that equation.
That's true, but I think a lot of people now realizing that maybe they missed out on something back then, especially like the shooter genre. Like you said, that for shooters, the TurboGrafx 16 was the best. There were other games too, like Ys Book 1 and 2, my favorite game of all time. I love that game.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about games that we're going to get to play on the Mini if it, God willing, ever comes out. Because I'm going to tell you, there are a lot of games on there, including Ys 1 and 2, that I never played. So there were only a handful of games I owned and played, and none of my friends had a Turbo, so I didn't get to benefit from other people's library. And that's why I was so hyped for this. Now, yeah, of course, I can go buy the original hardware. I know you still have the hardware. I don't have mine. I, to this day, have no idea what happened to it. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if my mom, trashed it when I was a kid.
They do that.
They do that, and they had no respect for this will be worth some money. That you say that when you're a kid, no one believes you. But I played. So the games I played, what was it? China Warrior, I think was the name of it. I always get the name mixed up. Played that. I played Vigilante, Splatterhouse, of course, and I loved it. And Air Zonk, I think that's it. And I loved Air Zonk too. And Air Zonk aged well. That game's so sweet and so unique. But that's it. And you're telling me there are gems like Ys 1 and 2, and that was going to be a mini. And I cannot wait to play it. I hope I get the chance.
I mean, I was more Bonks and Bonks Adventure than Air Zonk. Air Zonk is a shooter.
So
Yeah.
that's right up that genre. But the CD-ROM, I was actually surprised they didn't make like a separate attachment to play the CD games. I'm happy it eases on there, but that again would have been a cool thing to put on,
I
like what
know.
Sega did.
I know.
They don't think of these. They got to talk to us.
No, listen.
I'll pay the money for an attachment that adds
I know.
10 CD-ROM games on
I
there.
know. People would pay for that, and Genesis didn't do it, and Nintendo. What I thought they would have done if you just zoom out and forget the history of what actually happened. Anyone can produce SD cards or either all sorts of different formats of flash memory that are very, very cheap, that are durable enough that you can sell them at retail. And I can't believe they wouldn't sell packs of 10 games per card and you slide it in the back, or even just something that plugs into the USB in the back and then it's got a pass through or whatever. The tech would be pretty simple to implement, I think. And they didn't do it. They had no interest in supporting it as a platform going forward. And I can understand Nintendo doing that because they just print money with so many other things, namely Switch. I kind of get it with them. But then Sega, I thought, man, surely these will be the guys that release, like you said, release the attachments with the game. We know they're not gonna have a mechanical disc drive and stuff. No one cares. But release it and then have it play the games. And they did release it, of course, to some YouTubers in Japanese market, but it added no games.
Nope.
But that's been the theme. And so I'm assuming there's just one company that is helping co-design these products and put them on the market. I don't know that, maybe I'm wrong, but that they all have the same blueprint they're operating from. I think they're all using similar chipsets, and none of it accounts for added, readable memory that you can expand. And I think that's absurd. You could make so much money. And let me tell you, last thing I'll say on this, I think that's the opportunity the EverDrive has, or not EverDrive, sorry. EverArcade, is that what Evercade? Did I say it right? The handheld, and they're doing that right. They're making it a platform where they're going to release ongoing hits of cards that you can add to it. And that's not even original hardware, and people are excited for that.
Right. Well, a friend of mine, another YouTuber, 8-Bit Flashback, makes little mini consoles himself. He 3D prints them and he makes them, and he uses little NFC tags. So all the games are actually on it, but he has little cartridges, and when he puts the cartridge in, it reads that tag, and that's cool. The game it loads. He did a great job.
That's super cool.
And he even modded the Tower of Power. So he took his little Sega Mini, and he took the CD-ROM attachment, same thing. He put some NFCs on there, and when he puts it in, that's what loads up. So
that's
kudos to him, and I completely agree with you. They could have been printing more money, Sega, by doing something like that. Buy your 32X attachment, you get 10 classic 32X games. CD-ROM attachment, you get the same thing. I don't know why these guys don't think of simple things that we will spend the money on.
I know. I wonder if they're just unsure of the market. I mean, I know I'll often assume a lot of these big companies just kind of have all these answers, but then I see stuff happen that's kind of weird. So, for example, Arcade One Up, like what's behind you, before they released their product, that was an almost 100% unserved market. And I know you had mom and pop stuff like Rec Room Masters and stuff, but nobody was productizing vintage arcade machines for the at-home market. Nobody. And now we know it's $100 million plus market, and maybe more. And that's with, Arcade One Up has made some mistakes and whatever, and all these things. And it's such a big market. And so you think, well, wait, why didn't anyone do that earlier? And people do what they're used to, I think, even these large companies. And so Nintendo, I know Nintendo wasn't the first mini console. ATGames had some stuff out, but Nintendo does it. It's a huge hit. Well, they didn't add expandable memory. Who knows if that works? And then you've got to get the cards out to retailers, and maybe retailers don't want to sell them. I don't know why not, but yeah, I don't know. I think there's just an inertia to it because we've seen the same model replicated each time. Sony's the company that stepped off that train by saying, hey, we see what you're doing by not allowing for game expansion. We're going to do that, but we're also going to trash this console. We're going to use the wrong ROMs. We're going to use a really crappy open source emulator that we're going to pretend we made. And we're going to put games in it that barely are playable without a DualShock controller, but don't worry about that. So they'll step off the bandwidth or the bandwagon to be wrong, I guess, if you're Sony, but I digress.
Well, the one thing with the Sony, I will say, they didn't include the DualShock, and I get why they didn't. It was supposed to be a launch edition.
I agree.
PlayStation.
But then they shouldn't have put, what was the game that was the first-person shooter?
To be honest, mine's sitting in a box. But you're right.
But you know what I'm talking about. They shouldn't have put games like that on there. And then I would have been fine with not having DualShock. That's cool.
Right. And there was a lot of first gen or even second gen games that didn't need analog controls that
Right.
weren't even on it, and that's a head scratcher to be honest.
Well, and again, here's your expandability opportunity. Release DualShock controllers for $40 a piece. People will buy them, and you plug it in, and it unlocks some more, like some later generation games from PS1, and
Exactly.
boom, you just satisfied everybody, and you're good to
Exactly.
go.
Yeah, because I mean they're putting an expense in. I mean, like you said before, ATGames and other companies were making these little mini consoles before the NES Classic came out.
Right.
But in reality, that NES Classic is what really sparked the frenzy, right?
Yes.
So when that came out, retailers should have seen. Well, they did see people scratching at the walls to get it. So
Right.
a little thought behind that would have been just a little extra USB port, maybe underneath the expansion connector, so you could
Absolutely.
put on. You could have did the floppy drive. It wasn't released in the States. We could release
Oh,
the
that would have
floppy
been
drive.
awesome.
And you could put the expansion packs on there. So it doesn't cost much to put an extra USB port on all of these consoles. In the back of the TurboGrafx 16 Mini, the Genesis had the connector on the side, and you could have opened the door for more money, Sega, more
I know.
money, Konami, more money, all these people.
Well, we can't even add Konami to that list because listen, we can dog Sega all we want, and I'm with you because 1000%, you're right. And I wish they had. It's, whether or not it made business sense, I assume it does, but I don't know. Maybe they say it doesn't. As a consumer, I don't care about that. That the product you just described would be awesome, but all that stuff's out there at least for us to play on to some extent. And the reality is, you can add games with third party tools. But Turbo, man, we don't even have the Turbo yet. So I guess bottom line on it, I'm suspicious it's going to be canceled. If you put a gun to my head, I'd say there's at least a 25% chance it gets canceled. But you're saying no, you think it will come to market. It is truly just delayed, right?
Yep, that I truly believe that. I don't think they would have gotten this because they were pretty close to shipping time. They were very close when this
I
happened.
know.
So
That's
there's
what's
product
confusing
made.
because I don't believe that they didn't manufacture these already.
Right. Right. They may have a little extra in the packaging. You might want to wipe it down with some antibiotics when you first get them. But they were theirs, which is again, I do agree with you though. It didn't make sense in my mind to stop the pre-orders. The whole point of a pre-order is you're ordering, putting yourself in line for when they're available.
Right.
So that is kind of a weird thing for them to do something like that. But you know what? Actually, I'm going to take a step back. You know what does get me a little crazy, though? Is when you look at the TurboGrafx 16 Mini, I never liked how big that was. I prefer the PC Engine.
Yeah.
Why NEC
It's
of America
hilarious.
took that, saying, oh, it's the United States. No, that was a cute, adorable little console.
From what I've read, and maybe you would know this, it was a marketing decision
Oh,
that
yeah.
Americans would want like a beefier looking console. And that's so funny. But you know what? I'm on both sides. I think and I was thinking about getting both. Well, I know 3 total, but
Oh, yeah.
I probably would buy them all. But I thought the Turbo looked cool. Yeah, is it dumb that you have a giant plastic shell with more space you need? Yeah, it's super dumb, but it looks sweet. Where it really looks bad is when you slap the CD on to the rear of it, which I know, yeah, get it out. Because of the PC Engine with the CD attachment looked like that was a good design. Like that made sense.
So this is what we got here in the States, right here. And, it's a beast. Now,
That's
the
huge.
PC Engine, for anyone who didn't see it, I'm trying to drop it, would have ended about there.
Right.
So about half the size.
It was just a square.
It was. Now, again, also on the CD, I'm going to take this thing out here. So believe it or not, they actually touted this as you could also take a portable CD player with you.
So fun.
You could not. This thing
probably zero buffering on that beast.
It just skipped 5 times. Just skipped another 5. Breathing on it. Can't.
Right.
But originally it would look like this. So if you had gotten, it would have just been something like that.
Yeah.
But then they eventually made one that clipped on the back, so it was even smaller. It would have been something like this. So, I don't know. I just think what we said is right. When it came to the States, marketing says in the U.S., bigger is better. You got to make it bigger than the Sega Genesis. People are going to want this more because of it. And it was a dumb idea. Now, the actual console, got to unlock it down here, like so. If I can get it out here.
Please tell me you have the box for all this. Ooh, man,
it went flying. It went flying, but it survived on my floor there.
Good.
So they have this huge expansion connector, on the back that did everything on here.
Yeah.
But it does look nice, but I don't know. I think I would have still preferred the much smaller version of it. And
At the time, I probably would have too, but because I grew up with the big doofus version, then
Right.
that's why I'm cool with them re-releasing the doofus version. But they did make a change. Did you see where the mini will have 2 controller ports instead of 1?
Right. So
That's
again,
nice.
I'm listening back out here. When you look on the original, they had a 5-pin like DIN connector on there,
Yep.
and the one that's gonna be the mini will have 2 USB ports, which I think makes more sense. To be honest,
I'm really glad they did that.
But
That
this
was the mistake. They were so worried about the size of the console, but I bet being 1 player only hurt them a lot relative to their competitors were all 2-player native.
right, and that was one of the big things people complained about. I got to buy a TurboTap to play with my friend, so
Right.
that was one of the things that people did squawk about, and rightfully so. But me, I was always playing by myself, so I was fine with it. Didn't bother me any.
Yep, same here. I don't think I ever played Turbo with it. No, I'd play like Nintendo and Super Nintendo with friends, but I don't think I ever had a friend interested in Turbo. And I don't remember who it was. I don't know if it was anyone in either of our circles or just some other YouTuber, but I saw someone make a YouTube about the Mini. I can't remember who it was, but he made a funny joke about before you pre-order the TurboTap and buy the 4 extra controllers, think long and hard about if you actually have 5 friends that will sit down and play TurboGrafx with you, because I think it might have been Mad Little Pixel actually, but because there's just very few people on the planet that will sit down and play TurboGrafx, so getting 5 of them together is probably tough.
Oh, but that was a good point too. When you got the tap, it was for 5 people, not 4.
Yeah.
But games like Bomberman they were great games, and that was a 5-player game. Yep. But I agree. I didn't have 5 friends. I had no friends.
No, but listen, it's cool that they did support that. And getting back to our conversation earlier about the expandability, at least TurboGrafx is coming with those accessories. So they're recreating a whole accessory line. Sega didn't even do a first-party 6-button controller in the US. Like, what the heck is that about? And I have games on my Genesis Mini that are up to 5 players, but you can never play 5-player game on the Genesis Mini, even if you did buy like a USB hub or something. So at least TurboGrafx is closer fidelity to the original, at least from what we've heard and seen so far. And they are including games from that entire confusing line of hardware, including, I think they have 2 Super Graphics games, which is tight. I never got to play those. Most people didn't get to play those. So there are a lot of reasons to suggest that the TurboGrafx Mini could be the most impressive mini console ever. It's probably going to be more impressive than the Genesis Mini, and I like the Genesis Mini. And also just a dunk on Cool Toy a little bit. But it probably will be more impressive. And that's why, again, if it gets canceled, man, I'm going to be so heartbroken.
And I'll admit, I got the Mini, and really none of the games on there, like 2 of them I enjoy. A lot of it really didn't even excite me, whereas the TurboGrafx 16 Mini, there's quite a few games that excite me. Just, again, Ys Book 1 and 2 alone is an instant buy for me.
Ys, the ideal utopia. Once a country so peaceful and prosperous. A country where children were as free as the wind. A country where harmony blew through the hearts of all men. Ys, a kingdom ruled by the wisdom and charity of its 6 powerful priests. An empire watched over and blessed by the enchanting aura of its 2 beautiful goddesses. Ys, the seemingly tranquil paradise, suddenly pulled from the height of its civilization to the empty abyss of infinite isolation. How could such a land of promise simply vanish from the face of the planet? How could such prosperity be forgotten? The legend has been silenced for over 700 years. And now, the mystery unfolds.
It's just a really good game. I know some people complete it like in a week. It took me like 40 hours. I'm horrible. It took me like forever. But I really enjoyed the cinematics that were in there. The soundtrack's phenomenal. I mean, if you haven't heard any of the E soundtrack on there,
I haven't.
It's awesome. I mean, it's awesome. And there were other games too in the CD, but I think that was probably the pinnacle of it. But I think you're going to be okay. I think it's going to come out, but I would like it now.
So.
Now I really want it like now. Now that I know
But
I can
if
have
it doesn't launch,
it
man, I'm holding you accountable. That's how that works. If you're optimistic when I'm not, then it's your fault if it doesn't come out. It's just good fun. I'm looking at the game list now, and I forgot that Dragon Spirit's on it. So when I added Hack G to my NES, I'm like pointing behind me because that's where my stuff is. But one of the first games I added was the Dragon Spirit from NES. I forget what it's called, but it's the sequel, I think, to the PC Engine game. But I love Dragon Spirit. Like, I don't know if that's considered a great game or not, but I
I really liked the pinball games. They had Alien Crush and Devil's
Crush. But we only get Alien Crush on the Mini, and so I never played either of those, but I know they're really well respected. The consensus is Devil's Crush is better. Konami owns the rights to both games, and we only get Alien Crush. And there's stuff like that is kind of annoying. Why wouldn't you just put them both on there? Or pick the one that's the consensus favorite? I don't get it. But let's tie that into something else, because I'm starting to wonder who's in charge of picking games. Because if you think about, you take a mini console, and like with what PC Engine had like 700 games or something, like a huge library, whittling that down to 50, 60 games is a huge task. So that's hard, and I understand stuff was going to be left out. But who's in charge of those decisions? And I want to tie that in to Arcade 1-Up, because I'm waiting on my Burger Time. Did you pre-order a Burger Time?
I didn't. I'm like out of room. That's the only reason why. I have enough room for a pinball. I got to get a pinball.
Glenn. You need one Star Wars. Why do you have two Star Wars?
Well, you got your New Hope edition and your Empire
I know.
Strikes Back edition. You got to have both.
I get it. I get it. That's true. That's just good science. But I sometimes wonder who on their team is picking these games and why they don't get like a panel of 10 people that are enthusiasts for arcades and run stuff past them and check with them. Because when you start putting, I know I'm off topic, but I'm really annoyed by this. We start putting 4-way games and 8-way games on the same cabinet, but it's only a couple games. You could have very easily stuck with one or the other. I don't get it. What?
Being the era that it is, company like Konami or Sega could simply have a poll on their, on their site. What do gamers want? I mean, the whole point of these things is to get sales.
Right.
And I'm going to jump back real quick. We talked about before.
Yeah.
About we could play games on a Pi, and we definitely can, but we want to buy these things, but we want the original.
We want to spend money. That's what's so funny about it. It almost reminds us of when we spent money on it. I mean, it sounds so stupid. I feel like a moron saying this out loud, but you want to go into the store and walk out with the TurboGrafx Mini or the whatever. I mean, that's like half the fun.
Absolutely. So we've been playing for many, many years on a Pi, a PC under emulation, and we could do that now. But Sega, Nintendo, Konami, we want Arcade 1-Up. We want to buy the licensed stuff, but you guys are not always giving us away. So back to the we talked about before, with little mini cartridges, Sega, you dropped the ball because I would have bought the Mini, and if there's one game out of 10 on this one, and one game and 10 on that one, I would have bought both of those.
Oh yeah, because it would, it would have been like $25. Like, who cares? We're adults. We have jobs. I mean, it's you're not 12 anymore. You go out and you spend that money.
Right. We want to support the companies. We do.
Right.
I mean, I didn't know this originally myself, that Sega was originally an American company. I always assumed it was a Japanese company.
I didn't know that either.
Sega was originally an American company, and then it eventually went over to Japan, and the American company sold off to Sega of Japan. So stuff like that, I would have not mattered to me. I would have bought stuff anyway. But it's interesting when you find the history of these companies, where things go. And I'm just a little disappointed with Sega overall. But no matter how disappointed I've been with them, the Dreamcast will always bring me back. I love their Dreamcast.
And are we going to get a Dreamcast Mini in the next 10 years?
Everyone says no, including Sega. I think that's untrue.
Sega, didn't they have a statement where they
said they would not?
They said they definitively? I thought they left the door open, but I don't remember the statement.
It was left pretty definitively it would not, but I think that's a lie. I think that it makes no sense to being what everyone considers their pinnacle console.
Right.
The console that really should have saved them.
Yeah.
Just bad timing. And then people really would have saved the Dreamcast if it played DVDs. If it had played DVDs, it would have went very different.
It was just so stupid, man. I knew people that I worked at Best Buy sort of around that time, and people would come in and buy the PlayStation 2, the next year or following years. Well, it plays DVDs, right? Like, yeah, but can't you just get a DVD player? I mean, I understand it's convenient, but for a console arguably they won that generation so decisively because the first few years, lackluster game library, but DVD was their killer app. I thought that was moronic.
That's right. And DVD sales were not even that good until the PS2 got sold.
Oh, really?
Yeah, DVDs were there, but the sales were not great. But when the PS2 came out, PS2 sold, DVDs went through the roof.
That was an early example of product convergence that we saw later with smartphones, where you had the camera and you had the MP3 player, and all these things converge into a smartphone. And that was an early example of your video player and your game console converging.
The other thing, that the PS2 at the time was the cheapest DVD player you could get.
Was it? I know that was true.
And you got a console.
That was true with PS3 for Blu-ray too, wasn't it? It was the cheapest Blu-ray for a little while.
And Blu-ray was easy because that was a Sony technology. So of course you would have gotten that cheap.
I think Sony was involved in the DVD forum too, but along with a bunch of companies.
But the Blu-ray was all theirs.
Okay.
So they were getting every drop of that sweet royalties.
I'm laughing because how hilariously we are off topic. Maybe the conversation isn't just TurboGrafx, it's just whatever the hell we want to talk
gaming, about. Shooting the breeze.
Shooting the breeze. I like it. No, it's good. Also, I have to say this. Speaking of TurboGrafx for a second, I'm seeing Ninja Gaiden on the game list. Is that the same Ninja Gaiden from NES? Was it a direct port?
You know what? I had actually Ninja Gaiden on my Atari Lynx. I was never really into Ninja Gaiden. It was a hard game.
I had an Atari. I have an Atari Lynx. I didn't know Ninja Gaiden was on it.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's on there. It's a difficult, like everything on the links. It's a hard game. But I don't know. On that one, I really can't say.
See, I loved Ninja Gaiden. I only ever played it on the NES. I played the sequels on NES a little bit, but I never got into them because they're tough, and I'm decent at Ninja Gaiden. I can't quite beat it. I can get to the last like level, and I've never beat it, so I'm not going to say I'm good at it. But I know a lot of the patterns. I can run through the first several levels pretty easily. But then I pick up the sequel and I just get wrecked because I have no memory of any of it, and I'm not quick enough to just run through it. But I like those games. I mean, that's probably one of my top favorite NES games. So I would be interested to play it on the Turbo Mini and just experience it and see how it looks and feels, if it's any different.
Did you play the legendary axe on the TurboGrafx 16?
No. But why the hell is it not on the mini game list?
I don't know. That was a good game.
That's what everybody says. No, I never got to play it. But we get Moto Rotor though. How cool is that? You don't need Legendary Axe. You get Moto Rotor, bro.
Yeah, I don't get it. My assumption is it must be the royalties they got to pay out, or they couldn't get the.
Yeah, license. But isn't Legendary Axe? Isn't that owned by?
No, it wasn't. There was that NEC released it, but it wasn't their game.
Oh, okay.
I forgot the manufacturer that it was.
Okay.
That's usually what tends to happen.
Well, but there were some first-party games that are not in this mini list that people wanted to see, so it can happen.
It was Hughsoft. It wasn't Sunsoft. I think it was Hughsoft.
The hell is Hughsoft? Sunsoft's Hue cards. What's Hughsoft?
Well, maybe you're right. I'm trying to remember now. I cannot remember the.
Well, let's just look this up. So Legendary Axe.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I think it was first party. Let's find out. Yeah, it was developed. Victor Interactive Software and published by Victor in Japan and by NEC in North America. So maybe they don't own the rights to it. They were a publisher for North America.
Right.
But they weren't a developer.
That's what tends to happen with these things. It's a shame. But again, you can still play that other ways, obviously. And I'm sure there'll be a Hatchie, mod to the mini as well, and people will find ways to load content.
Right.
But I do like the fact, again, that CD-ROM emulation is included, which again was a little disappointing on the Sega CD.
Absolutely.
Like Terminator Sega CD was a good game. Sonic CD was a good game. It would have been nice to have those on there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's super cool. And like I said, I think for a lot of people, it'll be their chance to experience it. We know it's expensive on the collector market. Like you said too, anything can be emulated that's from that era, so it's fine. People can play this stuff one way or the other. But for the casual consumer or for someone that wants to go in the store and buy something, I mean, this was the first chance to play a lot of these games legitimately. So I guess all that's to say TurboGrafx needs to be released or I'm going to rage. One more thing on the Turbo Mini. I cannot believe the original game lineup did not include Splatterhouse. And they waited and there was all this rage. And then they came back a month later and said, surprise, you get Splatterhouse. That was one of the dumbest decisions. Unless that was always planned and they were doing that to build hype, that was moronic.
It's possible. I mean, didn't Sega do that? Did they not? They would release like 10 at a time. They had to wait and they released a little bit more.
No, but so they did that, but they said they were going to, I don't know if they said the total number, but they said we're going to make periodic announcements. TurboGrafx did that too. They made periodic announcements and then they got to 50 and they said, we're done. This is the total list. Sega never did that. Sega announced the games everybody wanted. TurboGrafx initially announced some games and people were saying, well, where the hell is Splatterhouse? And then a month or two later, it was, okay, we said we're done, but we're not done. So again, I can't tell if that's a marketing ploy or if they legitimately were going to leave Splatterhouse off.
We may never know.
As long as we get it.
Another good game I loved playing on it was R-Type. R-Type was a good game. Now in Japan, it had to be on 2 separate Hue cards, but in the States, we got it on one, thankfully.
Oh, really? So you would have to swap cards halfway through? I've never heard of that.
Levels 1 to 4, because the Hue cards, when it was in Japan, didn't have the capacity.
Okay.
So they already had space to put the first 4 levels on the first card, and then you had to pull it out, put in your second card. I almost want to get one, because what happened to your score? I mean, did you have to type in your score by hand? You had 2 separate scores?
That's a good point.
That was kind of weird.
Yeah, but, it's really weird.
It is. And I think they came out with R-Type Complete on CD, I think. But it's just a really good game. I had it on the Master System. And I think the Master System did a really good job. Like if we take the two versions next to each other,
Yeah.
it looks pretty good. There's more flicker on the Master System version, but I thought there was a pretty good port on both of them.
So Master System is something I'd like to see a mini release. That's another console I had, but I probably owned like 2 games on it. I don't know why I'd get all these consoles. I'd never go out and get games. It was not smart. But I'd love to be able to experience Master System again.
The Master System I got only because I bought the Sega Scope 3D version with the goggles, and I thought that worked really well. I really liked the Sega Scope 3D. It was LCD shutter glasses. It wasn't like a red, green. It would actually go between each eye and cover them.
Interesting.
And it worked really well. It came with a game called Missile Defense 3D, which I thought was good. But yeah, Maze Hunter 3D. But there were some other good games too. Phantasy Star. I loved the original Phantasy Star on the Master System and R-Type, obviously, and the gun, the Zapper. I think I had Rambo, which was an Operation Wolf ripoff at the time. So it was a lot of good consoles. And now I think some of that's lost because now basically when you buy an Xbox One, or whatever they call it now, a PS4 or 5, it's basically a PC just in a smaller box.
Yeah.
You can heat
it's
your
not
house
quirky like it used to be. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yes, I will, because I tend to do like the quirkier consoles. Like people hate the Virtual Boy. I love the Virtual Boy.
Man, the Virtual Boy was awesome. I'm starting to think you're me, but like 20 years in the future. I had a Virtual Boy, and I'm sure my friends made fun of me for. I don't remember that, but it had to have happened. But I thought it was cool. It didn't give me a headache, so maybe I was just lucky. Did it give you a headache at all?
Never.
It never gave me a headache. I could sit and play it for an hour. And what was the Mario Tennis on it was cool. Was it R-Type on that too? What was
it was called, oh my God. Yeah, it was the fighter game.
I have it. I own it somewhere. I don't know where it is. I don't have my Virtual Boy anymore. It's another console that somehow evaporated from my childhood bedroom. But
it was all vector graphics. It wasn't solid graphics, right?
That's how I remember it.
I cannot think of the name of it.
I can't think of what it's called either. But there are only like 25 games, so I'm sure we could figure it out. But man, yeah, I had those quirky games or consoles too. And on one hand, you could buy a console that nothing comes out for it, which 3DO or SuperGrafx or Jaguar. I mean, there were a lot of dead ends, but it was memorable. You got a unique experience. You could try to dunk on your friends because you had something they didn't or whatever. Yeah, now everything is so. The game industry is it's sort of a known quantity. Back then, no one really knew what home games needed to look like, so it was a lot of experimentation.
Right. That's what I liked about the old Atari. I mean, when Atari got sold to Time Warner, or Warner Communications, I'm sorry, just Warner Communications, became a very different company. But back in the early days, like you said, when you got a console, they make a controller for it. They would experiment with a chipset. All the stuff was coming out constantly because they really didn't know what was going to stick. Right. Now everyone plays it super safe, and I guess it's fine. I mean,
Sony doesn't even update their controller hardly from generation to generation.
Right.
I mean, they've settled on a design since '95 and moved forward, and yeah, you don't. There's nothing uncertain about it. You kind of know, okay, we've got these big annual release games. You'll have some quirky, put in air quotes, indie games, but even those tend to follow design paradigms that are consistent. The bright color palette game, like there are just so many of those. It's going to be kind of difficult, but not overwhelmingly difficult. There isn't a lot of surprise anymore. You pick up a game, you kind of know what you're getting.
Yeah, like I personally like the Wii remote. I thought that was ingenious. That was the next evolution. Then Kinect came out. Kinect, the lighting's got to be right in the room, but it was a new way to experience a game.
Right.
And we've gone right back to.
Well, that's what I was just having this conversation with my buddy the other day. He said, man, it's disappointing Kinect didn't work out. And I agree with that because for VR, it's a great motion tracker. The latest, not whatever, the 2013 Xbox One Kinect. But Xbox did something different. Yeah, they made a lot of poor choices with the pricing, and there were a lot of mistakes that were made, but they were trying something different. And a lot of the audiences kind of crapped on that. Like the people weren't hype about it. And I was try something new. And if I had a PlayStation, I'd buy a PSVR, but that hasn't been super popular either. So they do different things sometimes, but does the audience move with them? The only thing I can remember in recent history is the Switch was a little bit quirky, a little bit in it. Not even that wasn't totally innovative. It's basically a gaming tablet, but but it worked. But for the most part, these plays just don't work. So these guys are playing it safe, I think.
And I agree. To me, they've gotten boring. I mean, the graphics have gotten better, right, in the games. But I don't go so far. Like you can watch a movie with great special effects, but the story sucks. You're not going to like enjoy the movie.
You shouldn't talk about Avengers Endgame like that, man.
I never would. I would talk about Star Wars like that, though.
Oh, see, I didn't like Endgame. Yeah, Star Wars even worse. But yeah, I'm with you. It's got to have soul to it, man. There's no soul in some of these properties now.
I definitely liked Infinity War more than Endgame.
Me too.
I thought they dragged out too much of the middle of that movie. But this new Star Wars, here's my rant from yesterday I didn't do. The new Star Wars is eye candy. There's good special effects, but there was no story whatsoever. And the same thing with some of these games. I mean, they're fun to play. I've seen people have enjoyment with it, but there's still something just missing from it. It's flashy versus
soul, man. I'm telling you, the word you're looking for is soul. And I don't know how to quantify that except you know it when you see it. And TurboGrafx had a lot of soul. Like I couldn't quantify what soul is, but I can tell you TurboGrafx as a console had a ton of soul. You could say Genesis had some soul with its quirky audio. It's just unique, distinctive, weird, the way it would produce music tracks. But it was different. You knew when you turned it on what you were playing.
Oh,
it was its own thing. The controller was weird. The 3-button controller was not a great design, but I don't know. It had soul, man. We sound like we're 90 years old, by the way.
A little bit, but yeah, the original 3-button controller, was one step above the Master System's, 2 buttons. But I agree, they would play a little bit safe with that controller. But then the 6-button, when that came out, it was a nice controller. I mean, it's probably one of the more comfortable controllers you can use. And I'm going to debunk another thing here. People say that the Atari Jaguar controller was horrible. No way. That is one of the most comfortable controllers.
I don't actually remember. Let me look up a picture of what it looked like. It's been so long since I had mine.
It's a big controller, but as far as playing, the D-pad was good. The button placement was good.
Oh, right. It had the number pad.
Right. Atari was stuck in the past a little bit. I mean, they were from when the 5200 and television, ColecoVision had all the buttons down there. So Atari was a little stuck in the past with that. But the controller itself, people said it was horrible. It most certainly was not. The most horrible controller, in my opinion, was in television. Close, not maybe it's a close second, would have been, just as far as using it, would have been the ColecoVision controller. The 5200 was bad because it broke, but it was a comfortable to hold and use controller. But the Intellivision, that disc, it just sucked. I mean, it was just bad. And the ColecoVision, you're going to start looking like this after a while, because holding that thing, trying to shoot the buttons with But the Jaguar was no way, shape, or form the worst.
I'm looking at a picture of it. The 3 buttons, they're in the right place for your thumb to rest. I always hate when you hold a controller and your thumb has to be up. And that's why I don't like PS4 controller. Right. You have to have your thumb up here. You have to have your left thumb down. I'm just used to up. Forget what I just said. That made no sense. It was inconsistent. But for the Jaguar, your thumb is over. And then you can equally access all 3 buttons. With the Genesis 3-button controller, I feel like it's a little bit, like I have to move my thumb to the right pretty far. The placement's just real slightly off.
Right.
But yeah, the Jaguar controller just looks goofy. But yeah, I don't remember any discomfort with it at all. I just remember not feeling like I had any games to play. There was a game I had on it. I don't remember what it's called. It was like you're playing as like a little mini RC car in someone's house, and you drive around.
Yeah. It wasn't RC Pro-Am.
No, it wasn't that.
But I know what you're talking about.
It was just like you had a mini car and you would drive around someone's house.
Right.
It was really weird, but I don't know if it was a good game or not, but I remember as a kid playing it, I loved it.
Was it the Polygon one? Or was it Polygons?
I think it was Polygons. I'm trying to find it now.
Yeah, the frame rate wasn't so good on that. I cannot think of the name of that one either. I'm doing bad today with my...
But have you played it before?
I did. The frame rate was not that good on it, and I cannot think of the name of it. It was like a yellow car. You could be in a bedroom, drive around the bedroom, stuff like that. I cannot think of the name of it.
It was just so quirky and weird, man. And I think that's what I was attracted to when I was a kid.
They did have some good. Alien versus the Predator was a very good game.
And I never got to play that. And I wish I
really?
Yes, really. I wish I'd played it. I know now it's a legendary. It's a lot of people say it's the best Jaguar game. I just didn't know that when I was a tyke.
Yeah, that. You had Tempest 2000, Iron Soldiers, Doom, the best port of Doom, Castle Wolfenstein. very, very good ports. Of course, they had their stinkers too, like Kism Ninja, Fight for Life. They were bad. They were bad. But this card game's driving me crazy. Did you find it yet? Because I'm trying to think of what it was called.
No, I can't find it. I don't even know what to search. I just Atari Jaguar RC car, and that doesn't come up. Let me put it in driving. Oh, I see a picture of it. That's definitely the game.
No name.
Club Drive.
Club Drive. Yes, Club Drive.
That's it.
Some people have talked about it, and it seems that they had fun with it. I just thought the frame rate was a little bit low.
Yeah.
Almost like doing hard driving on a home console. The arcade games, like 2 frames a second.
Right.
Yeah,
I think to me it was novel. Like, oh, I'm in this house and I'm cruising around. Like it was a weird idea for a game, but it was nothing I had ever played before, so I thought it was cool.
And even Atari came out with a CD attachment that I have one. They're delicate. You pretty much could do the same thing on a cartridge. Nothing really took advantage of it, and there was nothing added. It was literally just a double speed CD-ROM on top. No additional RAM, no additional chip.
It was clear a lot of these companies they didn't want to get left behind. It reminds me of, I don't know, 10 years ago or what the exact timeline is, but when tablets first came out, specifically when the iPad came out, then people started thinking, tablets are the future of computing, and no one will ever want a keyboard ever again, and all this stuff that just never came to pass. But there was a time in the game market when everyone thought, oh, CD is everything, and it was eventually. That turned out to be right, unless you're Nintendo. But right. Clearly companies jumped on it way too early, and then they could go and market that it was CD. You just get the feeling a lot of these design decisions were formed by marketing and a marketing team and not much else, maybe.
Just think of Philips and CDI. That just say it all right there.
Yeah.
They just were not, CD was not right. 3DO came out around the same time, and I enjoy my 3DO. I still have it. A lot of good games on it. It was $700 back in the day, and actually I returned that one, and about a year later I bought the Gold Star version for $299, or maybe it's $399.
I remember there being a $300 offering of 3DO at one point, because I almost got one, but that was one of the obscure consoles that I didn't get sucked into.
And then, of course, you want to get expensive, you also had the Neo Geo.
Yep. Let's talk about that for a second. My laptop battery's running low. I don't have a ton more time. But for Neo Geo Mini, man, I want a proper Neo Geo Mini. I don't want the stupid mini arcade thing.
I agree with you.
I want what was the home console? Was it AES or was that the arcade platform? I was getting confused.
AES, I think, was the arcade one, and I get them confused myself. But there was a one called the Neo Geo Gold X.
I know. I remember. Like they didn't make it for very long, so it's kind of hard to get. And I think people had issues with it, but I don't remember what the problems were. But
Emulation wasn't great on it.
Okay, because I looked up reviews for it and decided it wasn't good enough, and I passed on it. And it was weird too. You opened it up and it had a little handheld. I just want a normal Neo Geo home console mini, and I'd be all about that.
You know what people are doing? They're buying the shell of the mini because they said it opens up, and they're putting pies in it.
Oh, that's interesting.
So you put the pie in there because the joysticks, I believe, are USB, so you can have the real joysticks. And I was going to do the same thing, except now to get that case, it's like $100 just for the case. I'm like, what?
That's what I'm saying. I don't think they made many of those. Yeah.
Well, I have the gold. It's never taken out of the box.
Oh, okay. I was going to ask you if it was what your verdict was on it.
I think I got it for $100, and it came with the unit in a box plus their expansion games. And it's just sitting there because everyone said the emulation was not great. So I said, let's put it on the shelf.
Did you buy their more recent mini arcade release?
I had no desire. I don't like the look of it. It just didn't. I know Metal Little Pixel kind of liked it, and he said it was okay. It just didn't do anything for me. It really didn't.
I think I don't know the guy, but I've watched quite a few of his videos, and clearly he likes Neo Geo games and stuff, so he might be a little favored toward that. But yeah, the form factor wasn't interesting to me at all. I just want something I can put on my media stand next to my other mini consoles, call it a day.
Was there anything else you want to talk about? You said your battery was getting low.
Yeah, my battery's low. I'm down to 10%. And when it does 9%, I got a few minutes left. But I think bottom line on the conversation, from what I'm hearing, I'll go back. I agree with me. I'll go back to the point I made earlier. I think the people making these games they need a panel of experts and enthusiasts more than anything to bounce the games lists off of, to make sure that they're getting consistency and stuff. And I think that's never truer than with the Arcade One Up guys, because that company lives and dies by the games they offer. And I made the point in my, I don't know if you watched my ALU review I posted yesterday, but I made the point that if I can walk over to my ATGames Legends Ultimate and play Burger Time on that, right? It already comes with it out of the box. Then why buy a Burger Time cabinet? Well, I know why I bought the Burger Time cabinet. The artwork is part of it, and then natively supported Arcade Perfect or close to it controls. Well, we don't have the Arcade close to it controls.
Right.
So now I'm questioning, well, why am I getting that product if I'm stuck? Now, the real reason I'm going to get it, I found somebody created a 3D print design for a switchable gate where you can raise it and switch it, similar to the Ultimark, except that gate is designed for Sanwa sticks. Right. So you don't have to worry about getting the Ultimark and splicing wires and a bunch of shit I don't want to do. So you can stick with the originals, or at least get Sanwa JLFs if not, and then put this gate on it. So I'm going to try that out and see if that works, and that might be the solution. But I shouldn't have to go hunting for a solution. It should work out of the box with the games it comes with perfectly. That's the reason why you'd buy a console that arcade that only has a few games. So I just do not understand that decision. But it's related to the TurboGrafx. It's missing a few games. Why no Devil's Crush? Who's making these decisions? And I guess you'd never make the perfect decision, and there'll always be some people that are salty, but it's really easy to put games that go with that joystick. Like, that's a really easy, if there's a line in the sand to draw, that one's a very easy one to draw. I just don't get how these companies can screw this up. They need to be talking to people, I think, before they release this stuff.
Right, and I agree. I've always said that controls is the soul. Hey, you connect to these older consoles anyway, and that's why I'm making the ones I make for people, because I feel that that's a very important part of the game. It's not just looking at it; you have to have the right controls to play it. And I agree with you on that one. So it would have been nice if I had, at least for the one joystick, to have a switchable gate on it.
Or either that, or stick with 4-way games only. There have to be other 4-way games.
They could put a lever on the front where you have the just slide over and it becomes a 4-way and lock it just for the one player. I don't think that would have been that hard of a thing to do, but
it would have been awesome.
I think it would have, like I said, would have made it better personally.
Yeah. Well, it would have, and it would have given that cabinet a reason to exist, because when Gen 1 Arcade One Up's launched and the products weren't that good, they didn't need to be that good. Because, I mean, look, we all went out and I bought a bunch of Wave 1 cabinets, and I knew they weren't great, but that's all we had, and it was good enough and whatever for the time. But now when there's competition, every single person who owns a Legends Ultimate, there's not really a great reason to buy the Burger Time cabinet. You're getting all of those games already in the Legends Ultimate. Yeah, now on the Legends Ultimate, you're not getting the optimal controls, but you're not getting that on the Arcade One Up either. So why bother with the Arcade One Up?
Right.
They have to get those controls correct now. I don't think they can afford to continue giving us the wrong. Not that they have a long history of this. Generally, the controls make sense for the cabinets we get that they offer, I believe. But going forward, I don't think they can do that. Burger Time's one thing. It's a really niche, I think, product. They're only making a couple thousand. Whatever, enthusiasts will find workarounds like we're talking about. But when they go to mass market, I would say like NBA Jam, but that's not a good example because those are all the same games basically. So the controls are going to work fine with NBA Jam. So they did it right there, but they just need to do it right with all these cabinets.
I think with the newer generations ones, I think they're doing that. I think that their next phase is to make sure these controls are more accurate to what they're supposed to be doing. Like I said, the first generation really didn't need to be. It was also testing the waters. They were toys that just kind of blew up into something more. They didn't realize it. And, when they came with the Marvel and obviously the Star Wars one, I mean, I have to admit, their yoke is pretty good for a plastic yoke. They did a really nice job with that.
For $500, $400, zero complaints. And that's the thing, too. I think if I work for Arcade One Up and I'm reading what people are saying, I see a lot of complaints and criticisms that, in my opinion, are not great criticisms like that. I don't know that anyone really complained about the yoke, but I see people say stuff that I don't think makes a ton of sense. Like, a lot of people were upset that the Burger Time cabinet has 4 joysticks because they just don't like the look of it. And I'm not going to argue with that. That's your preference. But that would never ruin the cabinet for me. I can live with that. or the combining vertical and horizontal
Right.
games. Yeah, it's not ideal, but at the end of the day, they have limited games lists they can run with per cabinet,
Right.
so I can get over that. So it's a nitpicky market. We're all nitpicky, so I can understand reacting to that feedback is probably challenging, but you got to draw a line in the sand, and that's where I think you need a panel of enthusiasts to say, "Oh no, we would never want to play Burger Time on 8-way sticks because it's a horrific experience."
Burger Time gets difficult at the ladders, and
Yeah.
with the 8-way stick, yeah, I died.
Off.
Man, if I got murdered, like ah, and the game
Yeah,
won't
it's
go up.
frustrating, man, and it makes you want to. And it's already a hard game, in my opinion. But once it becomes a cheap game, then you think, well, why do I have this $400 cabinet sitting here?
I want to thank Unqualified Critics for joining me today. So, where can people find more about you on YouTube?
So youtube.com/C, I hate how they do that, /Unqualified Critics. Obviously, just look up Unqualified Critics. If you've been watching the channel, appreciate it. Got into the gaming stuff not all that long ago. I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago, 6 months ago, something like that. So appreciate you guys that are watching. If you haven't watched us, check it out. I talk quite a bit about arcade one-ups, starting to talk a little bit more about the Legends Ultimate, but just kind of looking at retro gaming through not an expert lens, but just an enthusiast or fan lens, and try to share with you news where we can. But yeah, thanks so much, Glenn, for having me on. Very much enjoyed the discussion.
Same here. We got to do this again. We're maybe make this a good series going out. Just
Works for
talking
me.
about what's going on.
Yep, it's a good time, man.
So that's really it. I hope you guys enjoyed this little one-on-one conversation I had with the Unqualified Critic. And if you haven't checked out his YouTube channel, I'll have a link down below to check it out. He has some good content down there, and he's a really good guy as well. And please leave some comments down below about some of the things we talked about today, some of your thoughts, or maybe some things we can change in the future to make this more of a regular thing. I also have some other videos in the pipework, but I have a lot of things going on right now, mostly the Star Wars Yoke, which is still on target for July at this particular time. So I do want to thank you guys for watching today, and remember, no matter what you do, enjoy what you're doing, and game on.
At the Tiny Arcade fan page. Remember, don't admire people too much. They'll disappoint you.
Sit, Blue Blue, sit. Good dog.